All right, on today's podcast, we had the pleasure of speaking with Erin from the Daily Fascia, and it was so fantastic. I feel like we learned a lot, explored what the fascia is, and maybe some misconceptions about it, and how it can play a part in your overall health, and just things that you can do, some little tips and tricks, and things that you maybe didn't realize you could be doing yourself more harm than good. So, hope you enjoy this episode. Welcome to the Level Up Wellness Podcast. We're your hosts, Sarah and Steph, two wellness enthusiasts on a mission to explore the cutting edge of health, wellness, and personal growth. From mental health to alternative healing, biohacking, and workplace wellness, we bring you the latest insights from experts who will help you thrive in every area of your life. Tune in each week as we dive deep into the world of wellness and help you find balance, boost your health, and live with purpose. Let's level up your life together. All right, today we are diving into the fascinating world of fascia with Erin from the Daily Fascia. Fascia is something that most of us don't think about day to day, yet it affects everything from our flexibility and mobility to pain relief and overall wellness. So, Erin is here to help us understand what fascia is, why it matters, and share tips on how we can all improve our fascia health. So, if you're curious about how to feel better, move easier, and maybe even relieve some chronic pain, that's what I'm hoping for, you are in the right place. So let's just go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for being here, Erin. Um, Welcome.
Thank you. I am so excited to be here and have a conversation with you about fascia today.
Very exciting. So why don't you just go ahead and give us a little bit about your background, tell us more about you and how you kind of started in this line of work or got interested in it, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Sounds great. I am a former dancer. I grew up dancing and performing. And through that experience, I ended up developing chronic pain and repeat injuries. So I was overstretching my hamstrings, not knowing I had one leg a little bit longer than the other, which led me into overstretching it and pulling the hamstring over and over again. And eventually I started developing chronic pain. And from that chronic pain, I sought many different modalities to help heal, including everything that we're probably all aware of, but everything from acupuncture to massage therapy to iontophoresis, physical therapy, occupational therapy, and injections, and so on and so on. And eventually I got fed up. I did the MRI testing and found out that I had a buildup of scar tissue off my ischial tuberosity, which is your butt bone.
Okay, I was
And
gonna say
that's
let's get the uneducated in the room.
yes, your sits bones or your butt bone is your ischial tuberosity. And there was just a ton of scar tissue there that was limiting my hamstring functionality and causing a ripple of issues and problems and pain throughout my body. In that time, I was also in school. I have my undergrad in health science with an emphasis in anatomy. I have a graduate degree in holistic nutrition. And for 10 years, I lived in New York City and worked at Beth Israel Medical Center and in outpatient rehab and physical therapy.
Oh,
So I'm not an actual physical therapist. I'm an exercise therapist specializing in post rehab, including spine and multiple sclerosis, were two of my big areas. And I did a ton of continuing education, but I was also the patient during that time.
great.
Yeah. And so I had almost every PT who I was friends with and worked with, but they were all incredible, would work on me. And time and again, I would get momentary relief. And then the pain would come back. And sometimes it would be worse. And it was just this battle that I kept fighting over and over again. Finally, I saw a pain management doctor, and he had said, Erin, you have so much scar tissue, and there's nothing more you can do. You've done it all. And in that moment, I was crushed, and I felt like a big piece of me was lost. My personality, my motivation. I stopped doing all the things I love to do. Well, even walking too much in New York City, and
Right.
just going shopping on a Saturday caused me pain and suffering. And I also didn't honor any of the pain. Sorry.
How old were you at that time?
I was in well, the pain began in my mid-teens.
Okay.
And it ended up ending my dance career in my early 20s. And from there, I did 10 years of PT.
Okay.
And so it was about my early 30s when my doctor was finally like, I don't know what else to tell you. Sorry.
Which is so frustrating. So just to kind of give the audience a little bit of a background and use some background, I know we've chatted a little bit about this offline, but I have degenerative disc disease in my neck, and I have a pinched nerve between C5 and 6. And I am 40, but I've been dealing with this for several years, like level 8 pain pretty much all the time. And I feel like I have exhausted so many efforts. I've been to chiropractors, I've been to physical therapists, I have every contraption known to man. And I know, like, I can empathize with you and how frustrating it is when, especially when you have these specialists that are like, we don't know what else to do. Or, like, for me, the only alternative is a debilitating surgery that has a year-long recovery and, like, you'll never be the same. And so it's very disheartening, especially when you're young, to just be said, like, to be told, like, hey, there's nothing else we can do.
You're so good about describing that. And what I think about when I'm listening to you say that is a big part of this that is not talked about as much in our quest to feel better with chronic pain issues is the emotional impact it has and the mental health impact it has on our body. To me, I didn't even think about that. I just was pissed off that my butt hurt all the time. And then my left lower back started hurting, and then my right shoulder blade, and then my left neck started creating tension headaches. And that's where I focused. But so much of the problem I was in was the emotional changes that were happening for me as well. And anyone who lives with chronic pain knows that it takes you away from the things you love in life because your mind doesn't stop thinking about it, no matter how hard you try.
Difficult to, like, it's one thing, and not to negate anyone that has, like, a physical disability that you can see, but it's very difficult when it's like people are like, you're in a level 8 pain all the time, and it's like, yeah, like, but it's just like what I do. And, like, there's only so much. It's like you don't want to be a complainer to everyone, and so, like, oh, like, whining about it doesn't make it go away. But yeah, people don't understand. It's like I feel like I have a shorter, like, fuse, and, like, my patience is lacking just because it's like my body is always fighting something.
Definitely. Yeah. It's just, there's so many things wrapped up into chronic pain. And on top of the physicality of fascia, so fascia is connective tissue in our body. It's our packaging material, and for a long time, until very recently, it was just thought of this element that didn't really have any other properties, but just structurally kind of played a role in our body. And one of the reasons for that is when we were learning about the body in past, decades, hundreds of years, whenever there was someone going in to do a dissection to learn about the human body, they would use formaldehyde, and that would essentially kill the fascia. And so, as it was in the body, no one saw that it was anything important, really. Oh,
Interesting. That's
yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah. And so it was just discarded by surgeons, by anatomists, forever and ever and ever, until recently our technologies have improved so much that now we can see that the fascia under the skin in a live human is absolutely incredible. It's a miracle. And that's where we start learning more about it and why we hadn't before, and why this science is very much in its infancy. And I am very much a student that is learning every day. It's where I put my time and effort to learn, but I don't have it all right. But my quest is to learn more and more in order to be able to help people, because I know that this work has helped me so immensely and changed my life as it has so many people I've worked with.
So explain fascia like I'm a third grader. Like, go back and, like, again, just kind of like, for those that are not familiar with anatomy or like any of those things, just kind of explain, like, what is fascia?
Great. Yeah, I'll give you two visuals, one of which is an orange. It's very commonly used amongst my fascia people and people I learned from, because it really is helpful for people that don't know much about it to visualize it. You have an orange. The outer covering of the orange is the skin. When you go into the orange, you have the pith, and then you have the segments. Those segments are connected to each other, but also separate from each other. And that's one of the magical things about fascia. It not only connects everything in the human body to each other, it also separates it at the same time. So when you peel an orange, you see that the outer white pith is keeping the orange in a circular form. That could be looked at maybe as your superficial fascia or even your deep fascia. When you take apart the pieces, that's a different form of fascia. You can almost see sometimes it's webby like or even fuzzy. That's a different form or density of fascia. So fascia has different properties throughout our body depending on where it is and what is needed of it. And if you're someone who prepares meat for cooking, you'll see what people will call a silver skin. But sometimes when you pull parts of the meat apart, you'll see that webbing, that fuzzy stuff.
Like
That's also fascia. And in the human body, it is literally everywhere. So if you can imagine your nerves, your arteries, your eyes, things that we don't necessarily think about, we think about the muscles.
yeah, I think when I think of fascia, it's like, oh, I want to go do like I've been to a fascia class at like a yoga thing of like it to me is like muscle is how
Yeah.
it feels, you know. But you're
Yeah. So
right, like everything has fascia around it. Wow.
everything.
Okay.
Going deeper into the muscle, I think this is really helpful because the fascia work that I teach utilizes a technique that gets into the muscle, not just the fascia that's around it. So yes, fascia is around the muscle, but it also impermeates the muscle all the way down to every single muscle fiber. So if you think of one piece of your hair, even like a muscle fiber, wrap that in fascia. And then all of the muscle fibers next to it are also wrapped in fascia, again, kind of like the pieces of the orange that are connected but also separate. And then you make a bundle out of a grouping of fascial or muscular fibers, and then that bundle's attached to the next bundle, and so on and so on. And eventually that feeds out and it turns into tendon. So tendon is a type of fascia.
Okay.
So it's really, really extensive. And another way to think about it is if you were to take away all of your muscles, your skin, your bones, your organs, you would still have the exact same shape because fascia is that dispersed throughout the body that much.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Mhm.
Okay, so like in your schooling, let's go back. You did your schooling and you had your 10 years in New York City. So like were you always interested in fascia or like where did you have like this aha moment that you were like, "Oh, like I need to look into this more. Like this is definitely playing a bigger role. There's not enough research around it." Like where was that aha moment for you?
That aha moment happened about 8 years ago, 8.5 years ago now. I was going to a continuing ed workshop in New York City. It was a weekend intensive in resistance stretching. I was going to help just continue my education to help my current clientele at the time, which was primarily multiple sclerosis and back pain clients. I didn't think that any of the work I was going to learn would do anything to benefit me because at that point I had truly given up. I had done the 10 years of PT and I'm like, okay, I'm done. I'm just going to move on with life. And when I went into my level 1 certification, day 1, I let my instructors know that I had chronic pain and a buildup of scar tissue off my butt bone. And if I were to modify things, that's why I was doing it because I have the known scar tissue. So halfway through the first day, my instructor decided, oh, let me just work on you for 10 minutes. And so I laid down. And one thing that's really cool about fascia, it's stronger than muscle, 6 to 10 times stronger than muscle. So I was laying down and I had people holding me down in different areas. And essentially the work took about 10 minutes. And I'll explain that in a moment as well, what that looks like. And to me, it felt like we were in a location where I wanted every single needle and hand to go into and change and push the button and turn off all the pain. I don't know how to describe it better, but it was literally in my mind. I knew in the depths of my soul, like this is exactly what I need and this is going to change everything. And so in 10 minutes, we did 3 what I call fascia activations. It felt like duct tape being pulled off of my bone in a way that was really beautiful and wonderful. I was
Wow.
crying and I was like, oh, what just happened? Everyone's like, are you okay? Because I was also 5 months pregnant. And I got up and I bent over and I touched my toes. And for the first time in my adult life, I felt my hamstring stretch without pain. And I stood up and I had no pain. And I literally knew that everything in my life changed.
Oh
And
my
I
God.
walked around for like an hour through the streets of New York City, which I had lived for 10 years of my life, always in pain, and cried because I had no pain. And I knew in my gut, like this had changed everything. And 3 months later, I took my first yoga class without pain at, mid 30s. Um, and ever since then, that was my aha moment. I have learned and taught every single day and will probably continue to do so for the rest of my life. So yeah, that was my aha moment. I was at the right place, the right time, and with the right people that let me feel safe in trying something new. That was what I needed for my body. And the point of it is that we targeted known scar tissue. I knew I had scar tissue because I had the MRIs. Now, that scar tissue didn't come because I had surgery or I had a wound. And this is something that people don't realize, and I certainly didn't, was that scar tissue can build up in your body trying to help you, but without an injury. So let me use it. Yeah, so I was overstretching my hamstring. So essentially, the tendinous attachment to the bone was being torn off,
Mm.
and my body was laying the scar tissue down to prevent me from overstretching.
Interesting.
So
I always do this like, well, I think we were on a call one time and you were like, stop doing that. Like, but I always like kind of whiplash my neck because I feel like that's the only thing that can like give me relief is like that extra. And same thing, like what you said really resonated with me. Anytime I get a massage, I'm like, I just want you to like get like into here. Like there has to be something that you can do to like release. Like it that's a good description is like there has to be something that you can release in here.
yeah.
um so explain to me, like for someone like me, I mean hypothetically, if someone had chronic pain in their neck, like is this something that you can do on your own? Like I know like I found you, so we don't live in the same area. Where do you live again?
Minneapolis,
In
Minnesota.
Minneapolis. So like obviously I'm not here. I know you have some amazing classes that you have, and we can talk about that at the end and kind of share some of the resources that you have. But is this something that they need to go to a specific doctor? Are there things that you can do on a daily basis? Let's kind of dig into some of those things that you recommend for people.
Absolutely. It is something that you can do on your own, at your home, wherever you are in the world, which is what I love about it. It is helpful to work with someone that is a fascia practitioner, but even amongst us fascia practitioners, there are a ton of modalities out there that are people doing, some of which would include cupping, rolling, oh my gosh, so many massage, myofascial release massage, rolfing, so many things. So everyone has a different modality, and the emphasis is just that what works for each individual you work with is what works. There's no, this is the best way, and there's so many ways to try. But the nature of the work that I teach, it begins with the opposite of stretching. Stretching, when we have traditionally done it, takes a muscle to its end range and then it's held, and then breath is brought in, and people try to go past that point to create, quote, more flexibility or more stretch. At that end point, we have the feeling like, oh gosh, this feels so good. But a lot of times people are left with the feeling that it didn't benefit them the way that they were hoping to, or it did for a short period of time, and then the problem comes back over and over again. In that scenario, we have the risk of overstretching, going back to where scar tissue can build up in the body as a protection mechanism. That's a good example of that. If people are stretching past their capabilities, the muscle will start to become more stiff and have more difficulties with the sliding and gliding because there's too much stress in it, and scar tissue can microscopically build up within that area. And as we age, we feel aches and pains and stiffness as we go, and we think it's normal, like, oh, that's normal aging. Well, I think the science is going to prove that that actually doesn't have to be that way. And I'll say straight up, I feel better at my age, mid 40s, than I ever did mid 20s, mid 30s.
Oh, that's so amazing and very
Yeah.
encouraging for someone that, like, again, you kind of feel like you're stuck in this role or like this is where you're going to be for the rest of your life. But I love that there's hope for people that like there are, daily practices and things that you can do to change your body because yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. So instead of traditional stretching, I like to say it's opposite of that, just to keep things simple for people to understand. Instead of lengthening a muscle, a fascia activation would include shortening a muscle. Let's talk about the bicep. So when you shorten the bicep by bringing the hand in towards your shoulder, you've now shortened the bicep tissue and that entire area. Fascia needs tension and compression to change. It doesn't love hard, forceful, let's break it, break it, break it, break it up. That
Okay.
will typically backfire, and the science is kind of evolving with that right now, too. So, in order to add tension and compression to the fascial tissue in the bicep, when you shorten the tissue, you can press against resistance. So, you'll take your other hand to the inside of your arm, at your wrist, and you'll press in to contract the shortened muscle. Once you have that, takes about, I usually have people wait about 3 to 5 seconds so the nervous system has time to reach that area and for you to be like, oh, okay, feel that in the right place. Then you ease off quite a bit and begin to move the arm in the opposite direction or pathway while keeping it under resistance. And so as you're doing that, that's where you're getting the tension on each of those muscle fibers that I talked about that are wrapped in fascia. And it
Okay.
starts to reorganize them. It also starts to stimulate the production of hyaluronic acid, which is a lubricant, and
Hmm.
help with the hydration of the fascial tissue in that area. So
So
those are
it's like
two.
calling an army to go in and like and help it. Is that a good description?
Yeah, sure. You can think about it that way. Yeah, it's creating a movement sequence that does all the elements that fascia typically likes, the tension, the compression, and movement.
Okay.
Movement is key, and that's why static stretching can feel good, but not always give us the results that we're looking for because you're lacking the movement.
Okay.
Fascia likes
Like in
movement.
my back, in my neck, like again, I always try to like do a stretch like this. So that is the opposite of what you're saying I should be doing. Is that correct?
Yes, that is the opposite. So when you have degenerative joints and you
Uh-huh.
have inflammation, when you're stretching at that end point, you are creating length and muscle on one side and shortening the muscle on the other. But you're also adding compression into the end range of that joint. So instead of doing it, I call it the fascia way, would be, again, it'd be opposite. Your head, if you're just starting looking straight forward, I always talk about posture and patterns, which is another element of conversation we could have, but
Your conversation as I'm like
yeah,
working on my bed
different.
with
I
this.
know. Yeah. Yes. So ideally being in the best posture that you can attain. If you're focusing on the left side of your neck, your right hand would come up and over to the left side of your head, and you would resist by pressing your head into your fingertips. So you'd actually, you're in neutral here, or you can even shorten that left side by bringing the left ear towards the left shoulder.
Okay.
And then you'd wait for a few moments. So you're gently resisting into your fingertips. So you're contracting that left side. Once you feel that, then you're going to let the hand gently overpower and start to bring the head back up to center. And if you're able to maintain a light contraction, you might continue to the right. The neck is tricky because it has a lot of different ways to skirt around issues, imbalances, tensions, that kind of stuff. But the movement, my point is that you're not going to end range, but you're still affecting the fascial tissue and the muscular tissue on
Yeah,
that
you
left
can
side.
kind of like almost feel like a sensation, like blood or something going back to the area as you like let go. Is that correct?
Yeah, every sensation that each people have will be really unique to them because of what they have going on in
Right.
their body. But there's so many different feedback descriptions. People say, I feel light and airy. I feel like I want to cry. A lot of our emotions are within our body or within the fascial system as well. And there's a lot about that too. So
Okay.
yeah, so Essentially, the easy way to think about it is that you shorten the muscle or area that you're targeting. You add contraction to that shortened area by pressing against something, your hand, your leg, the floor, the wall, and then you create movement in the opposite direction. And that's kind of it.
All right,
So
we'll create a little cheat sheet for people that maybe we'll include of like, this is the step-by-step process. I love that. Okay. So
ah,
one of the things that I like to focus on, obviously I'm the worst example because I do sit almost all day and I'm at a computer a lot of times. And I think that especially right now, just in our culture, like people are starting to have a heightened awareness of wellness and specifically in the workplace. So I like to, discuss how people can incorporate wellness into their daily practices, for example, at work. So someone that's sitting at their desk all day, do you have some suggestions of things that people can do to incorporate wellness in their day-to-day life, specifically if you're sitting in a computer all day and things like that?
yes, my favorite technique that I came up with a couple months back as I was just playing around, sitting, having a computer day, and I call it the sternum up. And it's a postural shift, but then a thoughtful contraction of the posterior muscles in your back. For example, if you're sitting at your desk and you situate yourself that you feel that you have about 50% body weight in both of your sits bones,
Okay.
and then even work through both of your legs down to the feet touching the floor. A lot of us, even in that posture, will be slightly slumped forward, or our sternum will be almost concave a little bit. And then our head lifts our chin, and we get this kind of pump back or kind of arch in the neck there. So imagine as you're sitting there that you go in with your hand and you grab a hold of your sternum. And what you do is you kind of claw in there a little bit, and all you're thinking about is lifting your sternum up. You're not going into a back extension. It's just lifting the sternum up, and it's creating a shift of your rib cage over your pelvis. It's allowing for more freedom for the diaphragm so you can breathe better. It's creating more space for your organs to have separation from each other and not be kind of pushing down amongst them. And once you have that sternum up, a couple things happen. Number one, your shoulders fall back into a better postural position without forcing them into something different. And then your head will also sit more naturally on top of your shoulders and rib cage. So just feeling that, people can just lift that sternum up. Notice just what that feels like in and of itself. And then to take it one step further, imagining the paraspinals, they're the muscles that run up and down alongside your spine. As you're in that sternum up position, try to contract them. It's
Your
the most awkward.
or like, okay.
Yeah, like they're like almost like tracks that go from your down at your sacrum
Okay.
all the way up both sides of your spine to the back of your skull.
Interesting.
And what you're doing is you're turning them on, just like you're strengthening any other muscle, but they're not thought about unless you're doing a big back extension in the
Right.
gym. But you have this ability just sitting in a chair. But you have to think about it a little extra, just that sternum up, feel that shift in the body first, and then let your mind visualize or feel those paraspinals in the back and turn them on for about 5 seconds.
Hmm.
And then let it relax.
So I feel pain. Like I'm have terrible posture. So like anytime like this is normal. And so anytime I sit up, I start to feel pain in my back. So is that normal? Is that something that you just need to work through?
That's a great question. People will feel things in different places in doing this particular movement. It can be so subtle, but feel like a lot is happening,
Mhm.
just as you described.
Right.
As you start to do that, what you would do is you would ease off until you could lift the sternum without pain, even if it's a millimeter,
Okay.
and you hold it for 5 seconds and then let it relax. So it's just like you're conditioning any other part of your body
Perfect.
or even your cardiovascular health. So you don't want to go into that pain where you're like, oh gosh, no, no, no. You want to ease into it till you get just before it. And in time, as your body starts to condition to that, you'll get to go further and further until you feel like you really are in a better posture and that you can contract those muscles at the same time.
Perfect. Love that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Um, All right, let's see. Do you have any other like big tips and tricks? I know you had a couple things you wanted to talk about. So do you have something that you want to kind of guide the conversation next?
Sure. So, a couple tips that people can think about in terms of thinking about their fascia or starting to learn a little bit about it is being aware of your posture. There is no such thing as perfect posture or perfect symmetrical posture. It just doesn't exist. We are humans and that doesn't happen. We live life. But when you start to become aware of your postural patterns, it can be a really big clue as to why maybe you have pain in some areas of your body. For example, years back, I was writing a course on neck pain, and that is on my website. It's a neck relief course, and it's targeted towards fascial work for the upper body to help the neck.
Add to
I
cart.
was, yeah, I will give you the links, and I can give a code for listeners as well for a discount too. But my mind was just focused on what am I feeling in my neck as I'm doing everything. I suffered with chronic headaches, so I was having 5 days a week, 3 weeks a month, 12 months a year for years. And it was always tension that started on the left side of my neck and it wrapped up over my head. And then once it was there, I'm like, I'm in, I'm here. And it was always there. Sometimes it would be worse, sometimes less. But I discovered that when I was sleeping at night, whenever I was sleeping on my back, my head would always fall to the left. And so I was shortening all the muscles on the left side of my neck and lengthening all the muscles on my right every day, every night for my whole life until that point, probably. And I took that position that particular night and I moved my head in the exact opposite position.
Mm,
Initially, it felt awkward. I couldn't even really find where that opposite position was, but I kept coming back to it time and time again. Sleep is priority here. So if you're doing this at home and you're not able to sleep because of it, ease off, do what you can, start to build up, just like we talked about. For about 6 months, every time I woke up, I would move my head to the right. During that time, I was noticing a decrease in the frequency of my headaches. And after about 6 months, I realized that I could put my head to the right and it felt natural or doable. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh my gosh. And to this day, I sleep with my head both to the right and to the left.
which is
And
impressive because I've started to have some issues with like shoulder, same thing. I've slept in the same position forever, and trying to change your sleep position is tricky.
is very tricky. One of my upcoming courses, which I'm in the big early stages of production, is all about sleep posture.
Okay.
Because people will go to YouTube and you'll see all these. If you have back pain, sleep like this. If you have shoulder pain or neck pain, sleep like this. But what all of that advice is not taking into account is that each individual person has their own fascial story inside of their body.
Okay.
So that isn't going to hold true for everyone. So my hope is that I'll help people in the beginning stages of it realize what their fascial patterns are and to make adjustments even within the recommendations to help their body feel the best and not take them away from getting a good night's sleep.
Just listening to your body and like allowing yourself to kind of, I think becoming more aware and like understanding like what's going on and being like cognizant of it, I think is super helpful of just like, oh, like this might not be the best thing. I might not be able to fix it 100% of the time, but 40% is better than nothing.
Absolutely. And the reason that we can do that, again, another reason why fascia is amazing is because fascia is a sensory organ. It
Mhm.
teaches us what we're feeling. If you're aware, like, oh, when I sit down, I sit with my body to the left and I feel pain in my right hip or whatever it might be. Just that awareness of a pain or a referred pain that comes up is really good information for
Okay.
you to know about your body because it's all connected. And because we have proprioceptors in our fascia, it's how our brain knows that your hand is behind you or above you. We have the same interoception inside of our body. And so fascia really is this element, this beautiful part of us that can teach us so much about why we have pain. And I think the more people are interested in it and start looking at that research, they're going to have hope again, especially if they're living with chronic pain.
That's amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So yeah, tell us a little bit more about your courses and things like that. I know I just found your Instagram account and was super fascinated, and that's kind of how we got on this podcast. But yeah, tell us a little bit more about like what you have available and like how people can find you, things like that.
Sure. My website is dailyfascia.com, and they can find me there very easily. They can reach out directly with an email. I also offer a bunch of my courses on that website. So I have everything from an intro course to an express fascia miracle course, which is 5 days, 5 30-minute full body fascia classes or flows that take you through the whole body.
Okay.
An area of course, focused on neck pain, as I mentioned already. One focused on the transversus abdominis, which is, I call it the magic muscle. It's the deepest of our abdominal muscles and can be really helpful with people with back and neck pain. So that's a really good way. You can buy those a la carte. And then I have a membership on Patreon, just like a lot of podcasters do, where there's different pricing for different memberships for the month. And that's where almost all of my curated content lives. And those courses also are there as well. So there's a lot of ways. I work with people both individually in person and virtually. I work with people throughout the whole world. And part of that is because I have courses on dailyohm.com. And one of those is called the 2 Week Fascia Miracle, and that just passed 130,000 sales around the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. People
Congratulations.
are ready. People want something different. They are curious about fascia, and there's stuff coming out that is available to people wherever they are and whatever their needs are too.
For sure. So as you see, you kind of said that you feel like that we're in the infancy of the research and things like that. How do you kind of foresee things going forward in the future of how fascia is going to play into wellness and just the impact that it's going to make on the world?
I think that science will evolve enough to really show what modalities are really helping the most. I think one of the more recent discoveries is that the idea of rolling out the fascia so hard to break it up is going to slowly start to go away. That can be so problematic because the body can perceive it as trauma if it's too much. The lymphatic system is involved with fascia, our circulatory system, nervous system, all the systems are involved with fascia and they're all connected. So I feel like the research will start to hopefully pinpoint some modalities that are proving to really give patients and clients the relief that they're looking for. And I think that's already coming. But then there's a whole other level of like quantum health and structured water and just the sky's the limit, the electrical conductivity of fascia, its own communication system and nervous system, and lots to come on the horizon. And I'm just sitting here waiting for it every day and
Right.
searching for it. And yeah,
Perfect.
yeah, lots to come.
So I had a question about like stretching. So, we've discussed how that can be like if you can cause trauma and things like that. So, like one of the things that I've been focused on in the last year or so is just trying to do stretches. So I love biohacking. I, do a cold plunge in the morning and then I typically go outside trying to get sunlight in my eyes and go and do some stretches and things like that. So stretches aren't bad. Is that correct? As long as you're not overstretching, like how would you recommend someone that does want to get more flexible, that does maybe they don't have chronic pain, but they're just, focused on wellness as a whole? What do you recommend on a daily basis that they can do to incorporate this into their life?
It's a really good question. And people ask me that a lot, do you still stretch? And I don't.
Okay.
Or if I'm in a class that an instructor is teaching, I do my own little backstory. So if I'm taking
Okay.
a yoga class, if I'm going into Warrior Two, I'm first starting center, resisting my legs out or away from each other as I settle into the pose. I
Okay.
almost always offer some muscle contraction if I'm in a traditional stretch and I'm not going to end range anymore.
So
If
you're
that makes sense.
not ever trying to kind of bring that muscle to full extension.
No, I'm actually more often these days doing the exact opposite and focusing on the ability of my muscles to shorten well,
Okay.
which is something not talked about very often. And the capacity of a muscle to lengthen is dependent on its ability also to shorten. and also the health of the opposing muscle on the other side of the body. And balancing out between those two forces helps to then allow the nervous system, the lymphatic system to travel more easily within those areas of the body. So it's just as important to shorten muscles well, especially if you think about sitting. When we're sitting, we're stretching the glutes and the hamstrings all the time. So why would they need more stretch? Really, the hip flexors and quads probably could use a little bit more fascia stretch or fascia activation instead of the hamstrings. And that might help the hamstrings to be able to shorten better while the front of the body is able to lengthen better. So it's not always so clear.
Yeah. So I like to try to do something in the middle of the day when I am sitting all day like that. Can you discuss something that I could do when you're sitting all day and you just want to do that like 10-minute break? Like what would be something good for someone that is sitting like that all the time?
Oh gosh, good question. I
Sorry,
would do
put me on the
something.
spot there.
Yes, I would do a fascia activation for the quads and hip flexors. I
Okay.
would also move the rib cage around. So moving it in rotation and tilting. So creating rib cage movement can really be helpful too. And that's an area that we get really congested in, but we don't
Oh yeah.
release or stretch as much. But our viscera, our core, our organs, everything in the middle of our abdomen is also, all of the organs are wrapped in visceral fascia. And so if that gets stagnant, then again, that can limit the overall functionality of the organ systems. So I would say that doing a fascia activation, which you can come find my videos for, it's kind of hard to describe,
Yeah, for sure.
but shorten, contract, move in the opposite direction would be really, really helpful in an opposite thought process than doing a hamstring stretch.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Do you have anything else that you wanted to share?
Oh gosh, I think we covered a lot. Of course, there's gonna be a million things I'll want to share after we're done
Of
talking,
course,
but
we'll both think of it.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
well, thank you so much, Erin. I feel like this has been a super enlightening conversation. Fascia is something that we often overlook, but I think today we learned how it plays a really big role in how we feel and how we move every day. So if you guys found this episode helpful, take a moment to subscribe to the Level Up Wellness podcast. Don't forget to follow us, leave a review. And we love your feedback. We love hearing more about like what you want to hear, and go and check out Erin. Is it the dailyfascia.com?
Just dailyfascia.com.
Dailyfascia.com. Follow her on Instagram. Go check out her stuff on Patreon. She has lots of different resources, and I feel like they're super affordable. I love that you offer it, and it's not something that people are having to pay thousands and thousands of dollars for. So you make it very accessible for everyone, and we surely appreciate that. So thank you so much for being a part of this.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed being here and chatting with you today.
It was great. Appreciate you. Thanks so much.
That's a wrap. Keep grinding, keep growing, and always level up.